So I wanted to do a video basically recently inspired by the fact that the world chess champion was just crowned very, very recently. In fact, not even a week ago. Magnus Carlsen. And he became the second youngest in the history of chess to win the World Chess Championship crown. And so I wanted to do a video that kind of outlines just some of the basic points of chess, and especially the history of the championships and why it's so interesting. Because if you're new to it, there's really so much to say. I'm going to make a very extemporaneous video, and I'm just going to talk about kind of general knowledge that I have, not really go well into detail. But even from that, I could definitely go on for hours at a time. It's really, the world really is that deep. So the funny thing is, even here on this Wikipedia page, even from 1834, which was the kind of the first unofficial World Chess Championship between Laborde and McDonald, and wins 45, lost 28. That's pretty ridiculous by today's standards, but that's just kind of how the time was. From these ages, 1830s, 1860s, that was definitely what you call the Romantic Age in chess. Probably the most interesting as far as games, because there were no computers that told you basically what you're doing is right or wrong. There were just, people would just kind of play by the feeling. And for me personally, I think that was the most interesting age. If you look at chess from that era, it's so much fun to analyze, because a lot of the positions that happened, you can only get those positions if people make mistakes. So it's pretty interesting. Anyway, even if we skip all that very interesting history, just go into the official World Chess Championships, it began with Steinitz, and as you can see, he won several matches. It went on to Lasker, who also was champion for a long time. Just kind of a slight aside, but what really makes it interesting is, it's kind of funny. If you ever like to kind of nerd out and talk about things like Star Wars and Jedi, the same thing if you're into like Game of Thrones. George R. R. Martin made so many interesting characters that are really strong, and this guy's the hero, and this is the old hero from Legend, and this is the young guy, and this is the brutally strong guy. So it's kind of interesting to play around with that in the world of fiction. But the thing about World Chess Champions is they kind of are like that. They kind of are like that, but in real life. They're kind of, I've heard them really aptly described before as like mental gladiators. What they do, in playing chess, it really is kind of a fight. And it's mental and it is kind of physical. In certain ways, it can really wear on your body to concentrate for hours and hours at a time. So it's really interesting just to go back and kind of look at who really was the strongest. And what makes it so interesting is, more than like, for example, a boxing match, something like that, you can kind of go back and you can watch some older boxing matches, and it's kind of interesting. But it's a little bit different than chess, in that when you see it one time, or I guess like all sports are kind of like that. If it kind of goes really, really well back, even if you're a great enthusiast of it, it's kind of hard to get into it, for its time. But chess, no matter what, whenever you look at it, whenever you examine a game, if you see like a PGN of a game and kind of go through all the moves of it, it's pristine. It's exactly the way it was when they played it, and it'll be like that for forever. So that's what makes it kind of interesting. You don't need cameras to capture like if it was a boxing match, you kind of need like cameras to capture it, and the farther back you go, suddenly you're watching like Rocky Marciano in like black and white, or some of the old boxers like in black and white, and it's kind of fuzzy, it's kind of grainy, you really can't see, you really can't get into it so much. Chess is different. No matter when the game was played, if it was recorded accurately, then you can follow that game on your own kind of software or any kind of website that has a database of it, and you could follow it step by step, and it'll always be the same, and it'll always be very interesting, just very brilliant to see like what these honestly, chess players, they're kind of described as composers because they really kind of create this art, and the way they create this art is through their moves. So that's why it's kind of interesting to go back through history and kind of check, who were the really strong players and why were they so strong. So if we go back through all of these, and you can see there's a whole lot. There's a whole lot of champions, a whole lot of runners-up. If I could just break it down very, very simple and say there's a handful of people who people would say are the strongest of all time, probably the people who would come out in that equation would be Bobby Fischer, Garry Kasparov, and probably Capablanca, and maybe, of course, maybe Alekheim, maybe Paul Morphy, going way, way back, for various different reasons. And even if I just talk very generally about them, I could go on for hours. Let's just start with Bobby Fischer here. If you notice, from right here, 1937, and even slightly before that, Alexander Alekhine, 1927, when he finally beat Capablanca, Capablanca was just unstoppable in his time. So for 6 years he had the crown, and then finally it was taken away by Alekhine. And Alekhine, he's right there at the cusp of being one of the people that we would say is the strongest of all time. But he's got this on his record, which is a loss to Max Euwe. And Max Euwe, while he is, still remembered as a great player, he's often considered as the weakest chess champion in history. And if you just look very slightly over here at the games, he won 9-8, so it was a very, very close margin. People say he just kind of barely beat Alekhine. Alekhine, he had personal problems. He was known for being a drunk. And I think that I'm not totally sure. As I said, this is kind of extemporaneous, but I think that he was having some sort of personal problems during that match. And people say that Max kind of got lucky and beat him. So anyway, you could basically say from 1927. Look at the flag. This is Russia, and then Max Euwe, who was from the Netherlands. He took it for a brief time, and then from 37, going all the way down, we've got Russia, Botvinnik, Smyslov, Botvinnik, Tal, Botvinnik, Petrosian, Spassky, and then finally Fischer. So that was the interesting thing about Bobby Fischer, was he was also very young when he won the World Chess Championship. So all of his life, since before he was born, chess belonged to the Russians. So again, just going by basic knowledge, I believe, of course, if you see here, we've got the Russian flag of Alekhine, and then the Soviet Union from Botvinnik. So around this time was when Russia, changed to communism, and that's when they really wanted to prove that communism was, it was the way of thinking of the smartest people. And the smartest people, of course, are going to produce the best chess players because, of course, that's how you battle. You battle with your mind in chess. So around this time, Mikhail Botvinnik, he was basically the father of the Russian chess school, and it was, like I said, it was state-backed. It was backed by financial investment by the Russians. So they really kind of made it their game. And that legacy goes even to this day. Russia is far and away the biggest chess country. They've got the highest number of grandmasters, the highest number of super GMs, It's far and away the strongest general. Right now they don't have a champion, but of course they have many strong players. So the point I wanted to make was, ever since Bobby Fischer was a boy, chess belonged to the Russians. In fact, I never heard him in an interview, but I heard that he can actually speak Russian fluently, and he learned it because he was inspired by all these, Russian grandmasters. So, as we said before, all these Soviet Union players, Montvenik, Tal, Petrosian, and Spassky, and then finally Bobby Fischer. And Bobby Fischer, he beat them all. And that's why he kind of cemented his name as one of the all-time greats. Kind of the lone American who took on all of the Russians, and he beat them all. For his time, when he won the World Chess Championship, he did something really, really amazing, which was he won the candidates matches. When you play, when you're trying to be the World Chess Champion, you have to play, at least at that time, there was a number of candidates matches. So they matched, the top players, and they had to play matches against each other to determine who was going to challenge at the time, or Spassky, for who was going to be the next challenger. And Bobby Fischer did something really amazing. He won all 3 matches. The first 2 matches he won 6-0. So all 6 games of the match he won. Then I think the third one he won 4, and he didn't lose a single one. That is amazing. That's the kind of thing that you can speak very easily, but it's just absolutely amazing. At this level of chess, at the highest level Grandmaster chess, you just don't do that. Even if you look over here, wins and losses for, all the different matches that were played, it's never something to 0, right? Every person won some games against the champion. But in his matches, he blew them away. I've heard that compared to pitching 2 perfect games in baseball. So it was pretty amazing. So just to get to that level, that's what Bobby Fischer did. Now, his legacy after this, when he won the World Chess Championship, it was really a high point in chess in general. Now, I don't know because I was born in 1980. This all happened in 1972. But apparently from that time, chess really, took on these, just this huge following of people, because it was so exciting at that time. It was Russia against America, during the Cold War. So it was pretty amazing. And for Bobby to kind of come out on top like that, it was a pretty amazing match. Now, unfortunately, after that, he didn't really leave a great legacy after that. In fact, if you see right here, the next champion was Anatoly Karpov, and Bobby Fischer was considered the loser, but as you see the asterisks, it's by default, because Bobby Fischer just kind of refused to play. In fact, Bobby Fischer, he was known for being a very kind of cantankerous guy, and he was always disputing and fighting, the tournament managers. He didn't like, he didn't like this rule, he didn't like that rule, he wanted things exactly his way. If it wasn't his way, he would just walk away. And then when he became the champion, that took on a whole new level. They had to play by his rules 100%, or he'd just walk away. And so he just walked away. But he walked away on top, undisputedly the best at the time. So after that, you can see it was Karpov, and he remained champion for a while. He's also another guy who I'd say is quite on the cusp of being a guy who would be considered probably the best of all time. On the cusp because he had a long series of matches with Garry Kasparov, and he won the first one, but he lost the other 4 in a row. And they were very, very close. In fact, 1987, the 4th one they played, he was just about to win Anatoly Karpov, but Kasparov won brilliantly in the last game where he needed to win to make a tie. and in a tie, it goes back to the champion. So he was the champion, so he just needed to tie. So, both of these two matches are just amazing. Kasparov versus Karpov. Also, being very young, I didn't know about it at the time. I had to learn this, much, much later. But Kasparov, before when I said that Magnus Carlsen, he became one of the youngest in history to win the World Chess Champion, the youngest was Garry Kasparov. And it's only by like a few months or so, but he was still slightly younger, 22 when he won. So this first match they played, amazing match, but if you look over here on the side, the very outcome, the result was 5 wins for Karpov, 5 wins for Garry, and then 40 draws. So that's kind of a funny number. If you look any other place like that, there's no numbers quite like that. I mean, draws, of course, happen, and they happened very much at grandmaster level play, but 40 is just kind of amazing. So basically what happened in this was the tournament organizers, they said, no, that's enough. Okay, we played a lot, we're going to have to abort the match. Even though, Karpov and Kasparov wanted to continue. But I believe that Karpov had lost a lot of weight during the match. He was just feeling very ill. It kind of took a lot out of him, so they just stopped it. But it's a pretty legitimate win, 5-3. I think it's fair to say that he basically won that one. But 40 draws is just way too much. So as you can see, they went on to play 4 more matches, Garry winning each one of them. So Garry Kasparov, as I said, he's the other person who we kind of think of as probably the best player ever. And if you go to the FIDE website, the person who had the highest rating, the highest individual chess rating in history, was Kasparov. Until recently, he was ousted by Carlsen. But the one who's had it for the longest time, who's been world number 1, ranked number 1 the most number of times, is Kasparov. And, he kind of came into bloom 80s, 90s, even into the 2000s. He was still playing great chess. He was just undisputedly the best at the time. And, we often say, for all time. So, during this time, as you can see, there's a little split here. Classical World Chess Champion, FIDE World Chess Championships. I like FIDE, and then I hate them at the same time. It's funny. It's this organization, FIDE, FIDE. If you don't know, the organization which kind of controls world chess. Like I said, I like them and I hate them because they have this great thing. They're in control of the world of chess, which is amazing. This great thing. They're in control of the matches that are set up. They're in control of the ratings, the official ratings for players. So they've got this great thing, but they keep messing it up. I mean, okay, easy for me to say. They keep messing it up all the time. Of course, for that kind of organization that has so many, different countries involved, chess is all over the world now. There are grandmasters in so many different countries. So of course, there must be all of this, pressure from different countries that want them to do things in a certain way. But it seems like a lot of the things that they organize or a lot of the ways they do it just don't tend to please anybody. Now this is the main example of that. Garry Kasparov, as I said, during this time, he was clearly the best. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. He was the world champion, and he was dominating, most of the tournaments that he was in. But he didn't like FIDE, and so he split from FIDE, and he organized something called the PCA, the Professional Chess Association. So that was kind of like his own thing, where he kind of split and he made it, and FIDE was doing something kind of on their own. And the biggest example of what FIDE did that didn't really seem to please anybody, is this. If I just say the words Khalifman, Ponomaryov, and Kasimdzhanov, if I just say those three names to a person who really knows about chess, you'll probably kind of like share a private chuckle because they'll get it immediately. They'll know what you're talking about. Oh, okay, Khalifman, Kasimdzhanov, okay, Ponomaryov. They'll get it immediately. They'll get the problem. And if you can't see it just by looking at this, I'll kind of explain further. From all this history, beginning with Steinitz and going down, through all of that, even if there was different tournaments, even if there were different organizers, even if there were slightly different like matches, like how the matches were set up, all through that, the one thing that remained constant, and it pleased everybody, was there was a chess match. And there was a match between the champion and the challenger, no matter who that was. But for some reason, between this period in 1993, when Garry Kasparov kind of split with them, between that period of 93 2005, FIDE decided that they're not going to play matches per se, but they were going to play tournaments. So you can see right here, single elimination tournament with finals, best of 6 plus tiebreaks. So basically, from here on, they were playing these tournaments, and whoever won the tournament, they were going to crown the world chess champion. And the reason I picked out, there's a bunch of names here, right? Like Karpov, Anand, Topalov. The reason I picked out Kasimdzhanov, Khalifman, and Ponomaryov is because when they won those those Grand Prix tournaments. Good on them. I don't want to say anything bad about them. I'm certainly not a chess master. I'm not even a master. So the thing is, no fans of chess will truly acknowledge that Khalifman or any of these others are actually worthy of being called the reigning world chess champion. They performed great. They had a great tournament. I certainly don't want to disparage, players who are far better than I'll ever be. But simply put, the world of chess is not for one-hit wonders. One lucky tournament does not make a champion. So what's the problem with the tournament system? Well, sometimes it produces Khalifmans and Kasimdzhanovs, players whose names will constitute a footnote in history while the discussion moves on to, okay, who are the real champions? Now, you'll notice that I passed over some names like Karpov, whom I've talked about, and Anand, who you could see went on to cement his title, and even Topalov, who's kind of carved out some legitimacy. So the tournament system isn't useless, per se, as far as determining, who's generally the strongest. I just think that ultimately it left most fans just kind of unsatisfied. So during this split, Garry Kasparov, with his PCA, organized these matches, wherein he played a match. And he played a match first with Short, Nigel Short, very strong British grandmaster. Then he played with Vishwanathan Anand, another really great, future champion. But the thing that brought this legitimacy was, FIDE had the organization. FIDE had the actual, organization to what they were doing. They had the, how can I best say it? They had the structure. But what they didn't have was they didn't have the obvious best player in the world, which was Garry Kasparov. So during the split, things were a little bit rocky. I think this match between Kramnik and Leko 2004, it was around that time that I myself kind of got interested in chess. So when I had to learn all this stuff, I had to learn about, there's champions in FIDE, and there's a what's called a classical world chess champion. So it was kind of hard to learn. There was a lot of things to learn at first, but that's basically what it was. Is there's a split to where the best player split, and he had the legitimate crown in people's eyes. And then FIDE started doing this kind of funny thing where they started doing these tournaments, And I think maybe one of the things that spurred that was people didn't want to see Karpov, Kasparov again. I mean, of course, people like that. These were some of the best matches in chess history. But if that's all it was ever going to be, was just Kasparov, Karpov, Kasparov, Karpov, Kasparov, Karpov. And if it was going to be like that, I think that they didn't really want that. So I think they were given some pressure to kind of shake things up. So that's why they kind of went with this tournament's elimination. And then, fortunately, what happened was, back in 2006, finally there was kind of closure to that, because the person who was crowned champion with the PCA, Vladimir Kramnik, who beat Kasparov, and then he beat his challenger Leko in 2004. So he was the person who was walking around who had what's called the classical World Chess Championship. In other words, he beat the champion, Garry Kasparov, in a fair match. And Veselin Topalov, who had won his FIDE knockout tournament, they finally got together in a match. And it was a very good match, but, there was, of course, all kinds of controversy. If you kind of go into the history of that match, there was something they called, Toilet Gate, which basically, Topalov, I think that he's a really great guy, but he's represented by a guy that I really don't like, whose name is Danilov. And Danilov, he's the kind of person who really wants to cause any kind of, headache and any kind of controversy he can. So when he noticed that Kramnik was going to the bathroom very often, he decided to make a point out of it, and he started complaining and complaining. And there was one game of that match that Topalov won because of that kind of, complaining about Kramnik going to the bathroom too much. And so Topalov was defaulted one game. So he won one game without having to play a move. And fortunately, Kramnik actually ended up coming back and beating him. He beat him in tie breaks, but it was still a legitimate win, even though he had that one strike against him. So what happened next? Anand won, and he won another one of these 8-player round-robin knockout tournaments, and that took away Kramnik's crown, and he was mad about it. I saw a video in which he said that he didn't like that things were that way, but he's going to accept that that's what FIDE put down. He's going to accept that. And that was made more legitimate by the fact that after that tournament, there was, you could see a match between them that kind of, cemented, Anand's, his legitimacy to call himself the champion. So then, a couple more years, 2010, Anand takes on Topalov, and then he beats him too, and it's funny because the same kind of thing happened. Because Danilov was managing Topalov, he again used every opportunity to hit below the belts and to try and gain any cheapy advantage he could. So, first of all, the match literally gives Topalov, the challenger, home field advantage, because, as you can see, it was played in Sofia, Bulgaria, Topalov's home country. Then, Danilov convinces him, Topalov, to insist on a little-known rule in Sofia, which is no communication. So he basically insisted the match be played in silence, and that they only communicate through an arbiter. It was really funny. The Bulgarians really came out looking like complete bastards, because Anand was known as a very relaxed, very amiable guy. Oh, and it was just before the match that there was that huge volcanic explosion in Iceland that delayed flights all over Europe. And so, of course, Danilov and company tried their best to refuse a reasonable postponement. So, really, I was so glad when Anand finally beat him. And again, all of Danilov's shenanigans just fell flat on their face, as well as should. And he'll be remembered ever after as one of chess's biggest heels, or as one kibitzer called him, the sorrow and sorrow of chess. So Anand, he's also, like I said, just there with Karpov, just there on the cusp of being thought of as one of the best of all time. He's had his crown since 2007. Like I said, just very, very recently lost it. And he's been a very strong player for a long time. I would say just on the cusp, but probably nobody would say that he is the best of all time. So as I said, my case before is Fischer and probably Kasparov are the two names that kind of go back and forth in most people's minds as the best of all time. And like I said, some people, if you really go back, they would say Capablanca, and even before that, Paul Morphy. Well, you know, I could sit here and tell general stories about each one of them, but for right now, the last person I want to focus on my little list is Magnus Carlsen. So, Magnus Carlsen, he has the chance, I think, to be the next really, really great thing in the world of chess. He has kind of the ability, I would say, to be the next person they talk of as the best of all time. Now, you might think that's funny because he just won, you know, a little while ago, whereas Anand, who's been in, you know, chess for, you know, decades, and he just lost his crown. Well, Magnus Carlsen did something that Anand and none of these other GMs never did, which was he finally topped Garry Kasparov's record for the highest rating, the highest chess rating in history, which I believe was about 2860 or 70. Again, this is not totally real research, but it's something like that. Garry Kasparov's, I think, was 2851, and that stood for a long time. In fact, being rated 2800 was something only up to now about maybe a handful, about 5 or 6 people in the history of chess have ever done. Kramnik has done it, Anand has done it, and probably maybe 2 or 3 more have done it, but Carlsen was the only one who's actually topped the record. So, being as young as he is, being just 22, this young kid really has a lot to look forward to. And if you're in the world of chess, or if you're just kind of getting, you know, started, there's a lot of things I would say to look forward to in the world of chess from him, kind of moving forward. So, again, I hope that you enjoyed this kind of brief look. I want to do some more videos in the future that kind of go more into some of these other players. My personal favorite is Paul Morphy, and again, I could go on for hours in a general sense about the things that he did and why he was so great. But if I'm just going to talk about the strongest of all time, I would say for most people who are in the chess world, either Bobby Fischer or Garry Kasparov, and maybe the upcoming exciting topic is Magnus Carlsen. So, I hope you enjoyed that. If there's any questions you'd like to ask, please, by all means, leave comments. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. 見てくれてありがとうございます。